Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Tilley. I'm a member of SWIFT here at OUUC. And I just want to make a little introductions and some opening remarks before we start with the real program. Sherry Sullivan and Ann Fischel are here to do the training for us. Oh, Sherry Sullivan and Ann Fischel are here to do the training for us. They're from Strengthening Sanctuary in Thurston County. And also, I'm assuming most of you are OUC members. Is there anybody here that's not part of OUC? Yeah. So what groups are you with?
I just came to service.
And here we are. Okay. Anybody? Oops.
Repeat anything people don't say.
Okay. Okay. I'm practicing. Sorry. Okay. So this person said he was homeless and on the street, and somebody dragged him in here. I'm sorry. What else? Yeah. Olympia Indivisible, you said? Yeah? Oh. Indivisible, Olympia Indivisible? Okay. And Gail?
I just started coming a couple weeks ago.
Gail just started coming a couple weeks ago. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jean Eberhardt. I'm also part of Strengthening Sanctuary.
Jean Eberhardt, Strengthening Sanctuary. Okay, thanks everybody for being here. I just want to give you a little update on SWIFT, the group that we created a couple months ago. It's basically just an email list. We've had a couple meetings trying to find ways that we could contribute, add some value to the issues with undocumented immigrants. One thing that's upcoming is that we're going to be recommending that a fundraiser be added to the OUC auction to raise money for passports, legal documents, and other things for undocumented kids, American citizen kids of undocumented adults, parents, and developing family safety plans. Also, I gave you a handout that has the statement that OUC adopted, the board adopted about immigration and mass deportation. We've been coordinating with other groups through the meetings that have been organized by the Multicultural Service Center of South Sound, and there's another one coming up at the end of April. So there are a variety of groups. Strengthening Sanctuary has been doing this for years, so we're kind of late to this. And Francis Tanaka has been working with the detention center for years, so but we haven't been working on other avenues. Before we start, Gail wanted to mention her organization.
Hi, I just had heard you guys were meeting today, so I reached out to Steve and I was like, what can I do to help? What can I share? So I work for the Seattle Clemency Project, and we've been around for about 10 years, and most of our work is known for trying to get people who have life sentences in prison, commutations, or pardons to get them out early. But a large part of our work, especially the past couple of years, are trying to help individuals that came here as refugees or seeking asylum, and were here as lawful permanent residents, but 20 years ago, 10 years ago, they may have gotten a misdemeanor or a felony charge that now is, they're now facing deportation, and so we work with them free of charge to try to help them resolve stuff in the courts so that they can get that cleared up and stay here. And it's a very scary thing to be here, not as a citizen, especially with a criminal conviction. And I just think that there's a lot in the media right now, and like some of the guys we work with, like one guy 10 years ago stole a pair of shoes from Walmart and is now facing deportation back to Ethiopia, or you know what I mean? And so if you know of anybody in the work that you do or in spaces and you hear of a story that they may be afraid, they have, a criminal conviction, just know that our organization is trying to help people with that particular issue. So it's the Seattle Clemency Project, and I have cards if anybody wants one afterwards. So great to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you. Francis, could I call on you to just say a word about what you've been doing with the detention center? Do you want to? Yeah.
I actually haven't done that for a while, but there are a lot of organizations that are still doing that work. And one organization made sure when people come out of the detention center that they have transportation, they have a place to stay, they have food. So, and they had a little place where they could, when they came out the gate, they would just go right over to this group's organization and get the help they need.
That's called Aid Northwest, Advocates for Immigrants in Detention. Aid
Okay,
Northwest.
yeah. So we'll get information on that circulated around. So unless anybody has any other questions before we start, I'll turn it over to Sherry and Ann. Okay, thank you. You got your-
Thank you, Steve, for inviting us. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. Can everybody hear me? No? Can everybody hear me? Okay. Okay, I do have a soft voice, and I'm also trained as a filmmaker, and when you're a filmmaker, you never put the mic this close. So I'm undoing years of conditioning, and Teresa's going to remind me, so thank you. I am Ann Fischel, and this is my colleague, Sherry Sullivan, and like Steve said, we are members of Strengthening Sanctuary Alliance, and we formed in the very end of 2016, when we knew that Donald Trump had been elected to office, and the Olympia City Council was working to figure out how to protect the immigrant members of our community, and even more fundamentally, the basic values that our community represents. So we were at those city council meetings, encouraging and supporting our councilors to do this amazing thing. Eventually, they wrote a declaration and declared us to be a sanctuary city. Olympia is a sanctuary city, which means that the police in our city may not request immigration or documentation information from anybody, may not stop somebody because they're suspected of not having legal documentation status, and may not report any information that they inadvertently collect to federal immigration enforcement. It also means that with any of the agencies in our community, that no one can ask for people's immigration status, that people are entitled to all of the benefits that everyone in this community has. So it's a way of safeguarding and protecting folks. So, yes?
Does that include the public education?
Yes.
Repeat the question into the mic.
Okay, so the question was, does that include the public schools, public education? Yes, it does. It includes every agency and every institution in this community. Yes?
What about Lacey and Tubwater?
Well, they have to make their own decisions about whether they are strengthening, sanctuary jurisdictions or not. But in a couple of minutes, if you'll give us the time, we'll talk about Keep Washington Working, which is the edict that declared our entire state to be a sanctuary state. And that's also something really important for people to understand. We do.
That will answer your question.
Yeah. We do welcome questions. So please, feel free to let us know if you need more clarification or more information.
Okay. Well, I think we should just go ahead and jump right in. We want this to be interactive, but we also are being very aware of the time, and there will be a time at the end where we'll ask you to pair and share and report out on what you as an individual, what this church or any organization you're affiliated with or you know someone, anyway, try to brainstorm with a partner at the very end, having been reminded of things you're already doing in some cases, but hopefully additional things that you personally or you as a member of a group can do to be proactive and to prepare. So the three big units here are educating ourselves. Our slides are presented in this order. Sharing information. This is kind of an escalation of comprehensive growth, because it's an ongoing process, and taking action as you are able, as you are so motivated. And the bottom line for all of those activities is to try intentionally to stay engaged and learn from other people, and learn particularly from what you hear from the people most impacted by what is happening in our country today, and even in our sanctuary state.
Thanks. So, like Sherry said, we divided this into 3 parts. Educating ourselves, we want to talk about who is at risk of being detained or deported, understanding that those categories are changing every day, and that immigration policy, every day there's something new that's being said. We want to talk a little bit about the changing landscape of immigration enforcement, knowing that we can't possibly do it completely, precisely because it's such a rapidly changing landscape. We want to talk a little bit about the basic rights that everyone has under the Constitution, and about Keep Washington Working specifically. And then we want to talk about community strategies for protecting our neighbors. Some of the things that are already being done, some of the things that you all might individually or collectively consider doing. So I hope that works. We want this to be useful to you. So this is where we're going to be heading, okay? So deportation defense is a broad network of strategies that are being used to protect the immigrant members of our community. Know Your Rights training, which is the basics of which we'll share with you today. This is just a way of letting people know what basic rights they have under the Constitution, and also under the rules of our state. Wyson Hotline Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network is the statewide umbrella for immigrant rights and advocacy groups. We work in Strengthening Sanctuary Alliance, we work very closely with them. They've been doing trainings to help us develop the strategies to do deportation defense. They also have a hotline. It's important to know and publicize that hotline, and we'll come back to this later. Rapid response teams. These are teams of folks who are specially trained so that if someone calls the hotline in Thurston County and says, I'm witnessing an encounter on the street, there's an ICE officer here, it looks like there's someone who's about to be detained, I don't know what to do, the rapid response team immediately goes out to that place. We cannot interfere with what immigration enforcement officers are doing, but we can document it. That is our right. And so the rapid response team will film it on their phones, they will take notes, they will engage directly with the enforcement officers, they will also engage with the person who is being detained or harassed or questioned, whatever is going on. If they have family members who are there, who are obviously in a state of distress, they will support those family members. And then they will report back to Wyson, this is what happened, this is what we saw, here are the concerns that we had. Yes, they had a warrant, or no, they didn't. Or they may say, you know, we went to that spot and there was a van there that people thought maybe was an ICE van, but it wasn't. There was nothing going on. So that's a way of also doing rumor control. Observing and documenting immigration enforcement. This is something that anybody in the community can do, and it's something we'll discuss a little later in terms of our rights to do that and strategies for doing it. Accompaniment. This is a project we do not yet have in our community, but before COVID, many of us were training to do immigrant accompaniment. And what that meant is if someone needed to go to court, or someone needed to go to the doctor, or someone needed to go to some public place where they were feeling fearful and exposed, that members of an accompanied team would go with them. This is something we're considering bringing back now. It doesn't yet exist, but if it turns out that folks are interested in it, I think it's important. It's something that we could potentially organize. Family safety plans. Later on, Sherry will talk a little bit about this. We are organizing ways that we can sit with a family. We can say, we may not be able to protect you from being detained or potentially deported. but we can protect your children. Let us know who it is who would come and care for your children if something happens to you, right? Tell us where their school is, if they have medications, where they are, if they have passports or if they need them, as Steve referred to. What are the other critical documents that your children will need? And who is the person who has agreed to do this care? So this takes a little bit of time to sit with a family. It's very emotional, as you can imagine. But to go through it really carefully, we get those documents notarized right there on the spot. So hopefully they will have some legal compelling clout. Personally, I think this is really important. Years ago, I was in Shelton at an immigrant rights march. This was probably 15 years ago now. And there was a couple who looked like me walking down the street with a little baby, holding a baby. The parents had been detained and the child was left in the house. So we want to avoid anything like this happening, right? We want to make sure that children are cared for. And I also think that whatever fear adult members of the immigrant community are carrying right now, it is reassuring to know that someone will be there to take care of your children. Advocacy and public policy with schools and agencies in the state legislature. Steve, I think you and the SWIFT team published something pretty wonderful about the research you were doing on public schools and whether they were supporting the rights of immigrant kids. So I hope that information got around. This is also a really important thing, something that could be done. In strengthening Sanctuary Alliance, we also monitor pretty carefully the state legislature's policy. And there's ways in which you can participate in that. Sanctuary, under the first Trump administration, there was a sanctuary in this community, right? Does everybody know that? So you know it was a Temple Beth Hatfield. So I know that faith communities are talking about how to do this again. Given the fact that sensitive locations, the policy that in the past the federal government followed so that they respected places like schools and churches and hospitals and did not enter them. That policy has been abolished now. Sanctuary may not work in the way it worked before, right? It may not work in terms of a specific publicized place for a family to go and take refuge. But there are other ways in which we can offer sanctuary, right? And those are things that a lot of folks in this community are talking about. And finally, direct service, material and emotional support, fundraising and sharing information. So we're going to come back to this at the end and give you some opportunities to talk about whether you're interested in taking some action, and if so, if one of these appeals, and if so, and just to share that with each other and with us. I don't know. Do you need that on the screen? Thank you. Okay, so here are some ground rules that we put together based on our experience working with immigrant communities. The first is just to always assume, always, that in any space you go to, there are folks who are undocumented. We don't know everybody's stories, right? We don't know what people are carrying with them. So there's ways of talking about these things as if they refer to folks who are out there in some other space, and ways of talking about them as if they're happening right here to us, right? Show your support. Help each other understand ways of being inclusive. I put that thing about language twice, or we put it twice, because we feel it so strongly. We're surrounded right now with this language war, right? The ways in which our immigrant neighbors, friends, family, colleagues, right, are being demonized and dehumanized by this language. Illegal alien, right? Flood of immigrants, criminal aliens. Show your support by helping each other understand how damaging that language is and challenging people who use it.
I want to just interject to say one of the things I learned from a webinar by a multi-diverse faith community board was that the public narrative is all important, and it's now dominated by the loudest and most powerful voices in the country. But hey, if you attended or just are aware of yesterday's demonstration at the Capitol and across the country, and the language that you use as you write letters to the editor and talk with your family and friends and so forth and so on can change that narrative. It challenges it, and it puts forth an alternate that, that many people, whether they belong to a faith community or not, would embrace and do embrace. And so this language and the stories we tell and the way we explain things is all important. And you need to just listen deeply to the language people are using and address it if it's not reaffirming your values and our national values. Yeah.
So one of the results of this language is that it's criminalizing something that's not a crime, right? It's not a crime to be in this country without legal documentation. It's a civil offense. It's not a crime. So being able to say that, being in the US without authorization is not a crime, is important. And it can kind of challenge the way people might be thinking. It seems important. The other thing is, statistically, we know that immigrants are much less likely than people who are US born to commit crimes, and much more likely to be victims of crimes which they don't report because of their sense of vulnerability. So this is, you know, what goes with the language, I think, is some context and some information, which hopefully can change the way our neighbors, fellow community members think. Allow people full agency if and when and how to reveal their stories. I used to teach at Evergreen. I taught there for a long time, the Evergreen State College. And one of the things that undocumented students would say, I don't want to be put on the spot and made to tell my story so that other people can learn about this issue. You know, do your own research, and when I feel comfortable and when I feel safe and when I feel I'm in a mutually respectful relationship with you, maybe I'll tell my story. Yeah. So, you know, we try not to put people in that position. No one should answer questions about citizenship status. And I mean no one, I mean not you, not us, right? If none of us answered that question, those of us who have something to lose from answering that question would be less vulnerable. So as a gesture of solidarity, don't answer the question. And then learn and share the safe spaces and resources, and also the unshared safe spaces and resources. The Rapid Response Team was recently called to go to the IRS office that's in downtown Olympia because there were ICE cars that were lined up in front of it. And they weren't there to detain anybody. We went and checked. But what we realized is that we think they have taken up space inside the IRS office. That makes that space unsafe for any community member who might be at risk. So are there other spaces like that? Do we know where they are, right? Is the library a safe space? A space people could go to get off the street if they're feeling vulnerable? Which churches are available and when are they open? Those are the kinds of things that you can map and share with folks who need to know. So we wanted to kind of briefly review some of this information about who is at risk. And I wanted to say that we're leaving this with Steve, so if we don't cover absolutely everything that's in it, you know, you have the option to look at it again later. There are 14 million immigrants who have temporary or no legal status, and in our state, that's one in seven. 1 in 7 of us have either temporary or no legal status in this state. 40% have temporary status that's at risk. So you all know about DACA, this amazing program that gave young immigrants a leg up in this country to go to school, to work, to feel safe, to raise families. That is at risk, although it continues so far. 1 million TPS residents, that's temporary protected status. Little by little, that's being revoked. I have friends who are here from Venezuela. They started with humanitarian parole, which was a program that required a sponsor. We were their sponsors. We were happy to bring them. They're wonderful people. Then when that program was threatened to to expire. We transitioned them to temporary protected status. That has now very abrupt, Biden extended that, so they should have had more time here. That's now been abruptly canceled. So as of April 7th, which is tomorrow, they will no longer have legal status in this country. And their 12-year-old is in school here, learning English. The parents are both employed because TPS gave you legal authorization to work. They were digging down into this country and putting down roots like my grandparents did, like so many of us did, right? And all of that now is being pulled out from under them. 5 to 6 million U.S. children, citizen children, live in mixed status families. This is what you were talking about before, Steve, right? The idea that, you know, there may be parents who don't have legal status, but their children are born here and their children do, right? So if something happens to the parents, those children need to be able to have legal status, to show their legal status. If they have a birth certificate, that's great, but if they have a passport, it also means they could leave the country and come back. They could visit their parents and then come back, right? So that gives them some of the protections that otherwise they wouldn't have had. And 1 in 10 K through 12 students in Washington State have at least one parent who is undocumented. So these are staggering numbers, right? In terms of how many people, our neighbors, are affected. I'm doing a lot of talking.
It's okay.
Do you want to take this?
Okay, I can take this one. Get a little closer with weak eyes here. This is certainly something people are well aware of, but you've probably experienced in the past in some environment a day without Mexicans, a day without whoever, and realized, oh my gosh, you know, there's no food being prepared for lunch. There's no work being done in the landscape here at the college. Anyway, this is just to realize why across the country for many decades, really, there are outcries about illegal immigrants and aliens and so forth and so on. And then when something needs to be done legislatively, the people who the employers and the business owners and the people who are affected by the loss of those folks stop the whole process. And things, even in Alabama and Mississippi and very conservative states, don't move forward on this very hostile track because, in fact, we all depend on construction and elder care and farming and so forth and so on. So just to think of how incredibly essential this work is and who will do it if these folks are not doing it, leaving aside the whole issue of how they're compensated and whether they have benefits. It was a whole other thing. I guess that's, you want to add to that?
Just that I think it's common to act as if people are working here and pocketing the money and somehow abusing the economic system in the United States, but in fact, folks are paying taxes and they're paying into Social Security, not necessarily their own, right? They won't ever see it, but they're definitely paying into Social Security. They're definitely paying taxes. They also pay sales taxes, right? They pay into Medicare. I mean, they're paying huge prices for the opportunity to live and work here. And if we think about the reasons why people come, fleeing hunger, fleeing violence, fleeing oppression, fleeing the drastic results of climate change and war, they're not coming to something easy, right? So this is the slide that gives us both trouble because we could now add probably 6 or 7 more things to it. But a couple of things just to mention. This effort to end what Trump calls birthright citizenship, the right of children who were born here to be considered to be citizens, which is guaranteed to the Constitution, that's being challenged in the courts. A lot of the things that Trump has done are being challenged in the courts. We did want to mention the ending of detention removal priorities, because it used to be that if someone was picked up, right, they would have the right to go to a hearing in front of an immigration court. And in that court, they could talk about the reasons why they're here, and their background could also be investigated. If they had not committed crimes, either in this country or their country of origin, they would not be considered at priority to be removed. And those folks might be released back into the community and asked to check in again, at a federal office in 6 months or a year. Those detention removal priorities have been abolished. And in addition to that, high quotas have been slapped on the immigration and customs enforcement officers, which means that when they take somebody, they are not going to say, is this person a danger? Is this person a criminal in the way we define criminal? Has this person done anything that would lead us to feel that they're at risk to the community? They're just going to say, we suspect that your papers are not in order, and they can, I feel like, I guess this is still working, and they can detain them. They've also expanded expedited removal, which means that that person could be deported immediately, which means that the ICE officer is the person who does the detaining, does the judging, and then does the deporting, right? So there is no longer a path through the immigration courts for most folks, unless there's a lawyer who immediately intervenes and demands a hearing. Were there others, those that you felt we should discuss?
No, only the point that there is no safe period. If you were here for longer than 2 years, you used to be encouraged to carry some evidence of that fact, so that when ICE stopped you, you could produce it, and if you had no other record or any other criminal reason to be deported, that was enough. But now, obviously, from the news, you've seen plenty of examples of people just being picked up immediately and removed, even with documentation that is recognized by the law.
So, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, this is the group that we're all scared comes to the community, right? And we cannot keep them out. Being a sanctuary city doesn't mean we have the right to keep them out of our streets or even out of our jails. We can prevent them from interviewing people who've been picked up and are in the jails, and our police are very good about letting folks they've detained know their rights in that respect. But we cannot keep them from simply accosting people on the street, waiting outside the food bank, waiting outside Walmart, or making or doing work raids. And we'll talk in a minute more about work raids. This is one of the most efficient ways for them to pick people up, and it's increasingly what we're starting to see in our region.
Warrants.
What?
Maybe go right to the warrants.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, we have copies of this, so you don't have to be able to read the distinction between an immigration or administrative warrant and a judicial warrant. The judicial warrant needs to be signed by a judge. It needs to come from a district court or a federal court, and we even have a list of the judges. It needs to name the place where the warrant is being served and the reason. And so you can check if you're in rapid response, accompaniment, any encounter with ICE where you're asking for a warrant and a warrant is appropriate, you want to know the difference. The other, an immigration warrant is issued by ICE, by the Department of Homeland Security, and it is signed by an administrator in that office. It's easy to see just the difference in the amount of typing that's there. Anyway, that's a really important thing to have in your knowledge bucket when you are actively involved with immigrants and prepared for encounters with ICE. The difference is what is on what you see on the 2 pages. The impact that it has to, okay. They're not supposed to, but you also cannot interfere. Exactly, and you at the church. Yes, the question is, what's the difference in requiring a judicial warrant as opposed to an immigration warrant? The difference is that they are violating the law if they come in without a judicial warrant, or no warrant at all. And of course, the part of the challenge for us is that has not made a difference in many of the cases we've seen and the sweeps that are occurring across the country. But as a recorder and observer, you can gather that information in the hopes and possibility that at some point this will be adjudicated, it will go through the court, and there will be this evidence that they violated a basic law. Did that answer your question? Okay.
To get a court, a judge to sign a warrant, you have to show cause. If you have a warrant from ICE itself that didn't pass through the courts, it's just a catch-all warrant, right? It doesn't necessarily have to have any names. They're not looking for anybody specific. They may just have said, we're going to go through a housing project. And then they brandish that piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
So they can be generic if they're from ICE?
Yes.
Even after the
It doesn't have to have a name or an address. It doesn't have to have the date.
It just looks official to the person who's receiving it. Yeah.
So is it bringing the mic, one of the mics to the
I'll do that. I'll do that.
Thank you. So my question is, what does the ICE warrant actually, I mean, does it have any true legal standing for anything?
No.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to clarify. So you said we can't interfere, but if we see this happening and they don't have a judicial warrant, we could tell them to go away. And we could risk arrest, yeah?
You cannot interfere with them in any way. You need to stay at least 5 feet from them, and you announce your presence. You announce your right to record, and to even speak with the person who's being accosted, reminding them that they have a right to be silent, but not ordering them to do anything. You can't physically interfere at all.
I do want to think just a minute. I do want to qualify my answer to your question. I think if the ICE warrant has a name on it, and that is the person they came to pick up, I think it may have some validity. But it's important to know if they're willing to show it to you, which they're often not. I mean, we'll have to talk about the practicalities of this. You can ask for it.
You do.
You absolutely show me the warrant. Or you can say to the person who's being harassed or detained, ask to see the warrant. Ask to see it. Tell us what's in it. Take a picture of it, right?
And-
You had a question.
The term legal is really getting washed up. Yeah, the term legal is really getting washed up lately, but why are the ICE people wearing masks, and are they really legally allowed to wear masks?
We don't know. They're doing a lot of things they are not legally allowed to do.
Well, that's
So
just-
some of these issues of the rights we're talking about are rights that we know are systematically being violated.
And is ACLU or anybody, not ACLU, who is it?
ACLU is
Is anybody
involved.
working on that?
Yes,
mask thing?
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
So they could just have a pad of ICE.
Mike, yeah.
So they can just have a pad of, like a notebook with just whip them out, anybody they see, right?
This is not justice, right?
No,
No,
yeah,
we're not.
okay.
Let's not expect justice from this, right?
Right.
I mean, but we're thinking about ways that we can show our resistance and show our support for the people who are being targeted.
So as a person who lives alone, I know that if someone dressed as a police officer comes to my door, I can not let them in right away. I can call the police department myself,
and verify their badge number before I open the door for that person, just to verify they are indeed a police officer. Have there been known cases of people impersonating ICE officers? And are there methods similar to that for people to check?
The advice is that you do not open the door. You say, show me the warrant. Slip it under the door or hold it up to a window. Let me see it. The other piece of the advice is to be on the phone with the hotline so that they can be giving you advice. And then the hotline is calling people to come to observe from the outside. And calling your local police department is not a bad idea. We have been in presentations where local law enforcement has said, if ICE is in this community, we want to know about it, right? We are part of this community too. So thank you for that.
What about right to counsel?
You have a right to counsel, 14th Amendment, but the government has no responsibility to provide a counsel for an immigration case, so you have to insist.
Are there attorneys
Yes.
available?
You can call the Northwest Immigrant...
ACLU or other pro bono?
Call the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, Colectivo Legal. I think these are on the list of resources that we're going to, that you'll see at the end of this, right?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I heard a rumor about 2 weeks ago that ICE was camping out at the IRS, and you mentioned that as well in Olympia. Is that accurate?
We don't know if they're camping out. We know that they were there. We know that they were not there to detain anybody. And we know that when some members of our rapid response team went in to ask, there was an immediate kind of circling of the wagons of, why are you here? Why are you asking questions? We don't need to talk with you. We have also been reading about how nationally the IRS is being pulled into collaboration with Homeland Security because so many of our immigrant neighbors, brothers, sisters file taxes, right? And so they may not, they may not have the same kind of, what is it called? It's called an I-10 that you file, right?
So the ICE cars are not still hanging out at IRS?
We have not checked, but I'm just offering it as an example to say it's good for us to try to map those places in the community.
I'm going to check on the way home.
Please do. Yeah. Thank you. They were probably just there to say hi and get a cup of coffee. I mean, 3 Magnets is right there. Maybe they wanted a beer. I don't know. I really don't know. All I would say is if they're on cozy terms with that office, that's a place to sorry? But no accountability. No.
I have a question. So suppose people show up. I've seen some videos of ICE arrests where they weren't wearing uniforms, badges.
Right.
How would you know they aren't vigilantes? I mean,
we don't.
And if they can ICE, are they supposed to offer their badge numbers or any identification at all, or is that?
Yes, they are, and they're saying that they don't have to. You're absolutely right, Steve. They're coming in unmarked cars. They're coming without uniforms. They're coming masked. They're coming without warrants, and they're simply seizing people. They're doing it because they can. I know this is kind of scary language, right? It's not what we would expect, however critical we are of our law enforcement system. But that is what's happening. I think you probably all saw the young Tufts student who was just picked up on the street. If I'd been her, I would have been terrified. I would have thought I was being kidnapped. Who kidnapped me? What did they want with me? Right? So no, we don't know. All of these things are being challenged in the courts. How effective the courts are going to be without enforcement mechanisms, we don't know. We'll take maybe one more question and then try to keep going.
When they get them, they immediately move them to a different jurisdiction so that they can't, you're trying to find someone in New York and they're down in Louisiana where another more conservative court would be involved in it.
Yeah, that's right. Last comment, just in the interest of time.
If they are illegally detaining people, why can't our local police ask them to see our local police? Can you call the local police? They will ask to see their warrant and everything. If they're not identifying themselves as law enforcement.
I think that's a legitimate question for the police department. you know, this is part of what you can do as citizens, because you are being impacted as well. I think that this knowledge of the judicial warrant and the whole scope of what our constitutional rights are bedrock to us, but we've lived so long under that assumption that they're in place and they're being observed, that we tend not to even remember exactly what they say. And so you as a church, you as an individual, one of the things you can do, one of the action steps, is to actually talk to the police, ask them, or go to a school and ask whether they're following the Attorney General's policy with how they should respond as an organization to ICE at the door. You know, all of these are things that are being challenged and demolished at the federal level, and we need to, all of us, take responsibility and use our voices and our actions to respond. That's how change is going to come about, even though we know how outrageously these acts are taking place across the country. The police department at Olympia, by the way, we've heard, has a sign on the in the car for the backseat people they've picked up for whatever reason that is "Know Your Rights." That's how supportive our Olympia Police Department is, and they have been since early in this process, since Trump won the first time, first election. Yeah.
So just briefly, these rights, which I admit I never thought about until I see this crisis going on, right? But they're important, and I want to say that I was in Beaverton, Oregon, at the Aloha Church in what was called an Asamblea Popular, a popular assembly, with an amazing Guatemalan, an amazing educator of Guatemalan origin, doing a Know Your Rights workshop. And he started with these very basic things that we're going to talk about briefly. And what I saw was people literally standing straighter. And because there's something about, if you live in a country where your legal statuses have to been sort of undercover, where you've often had to live in the shadows, to be able to claim these rights, even if they're going to be violated, makes some difference, I think, in terms of people's sense of inclusion, in terms of what it means to be here and to feel like you belong. So it was kind of electrifying to be in that group. I was one of about 6 people. The whole thing was conducted in Spanish. I was one of about 6 Anglos in the group. I understood enough to follow along. But I loved seeing that response. So people were being told that the Fourth Amendment restricts the government's power to search you in your home without a warrant, and that you can say no to that. I don't consent to a search. And we had people practice, no consento a un registro, quiero ver el orden. I want to see the warrant. We had people practice that, right? In voz alta, aloud. The Fifth Amendment guarantees the right to remain silent. You don't have to answer questions about where you were born or whether you're a citizen or how you entered the country. And so we had people practice, tengo el derecho a guardar silencio. I have the right to remain silent, to keep silent. And finally, what this gentleman asked about, the 14th Amendment guarantees the right to be represented by an attorney and the right to refuse to sign any document that your attorney has not agreed that you should sign. And so even if most of us don't have an attorney in our pocket, right? At this point, there are phone numbers of attorneys that you can keep, or the phone number of the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project that you can keep in your pocket, and you can say, I demand the right to call my attorney. The government does not have any right legal responsibility to provide you with an attorney unless you're a child. So they won't offer it to you the way they would for someone who is known to be a citizen, but you can still demand it.
So as an ally, an advocate, when you educate yourself, you can also prepare yourself for that scenario with the name of the Wyson hotline with the name of the NERP or other ACLU pro bono attorney list. So you can tell the person you have a right to call a lawyer. Here's the number. Right?
And I will say that one of our goals is to have a kind of a list of immigrant attorneys, immigration attorneys who will be available, who will take the phone call, or someone in their office will take it and say, absolutely, even if they have to farm it out to somebody else. We need those resources, right? So if you know some folks who would like to be part of that, that would be really, or if you could be part of that, if you have that training, that would be really helpful. We have the First Amendment right to observe and document law enforcement activities. That's where that comes from, okay? It's a constitutional right. So Keep Washington Working was passed in 2019. This was an extraordinary thing for our legislature to do. It prohibits law enforcement from doing federal immigration enforcement. There are places in the country where local law enforcement is being tapped to do that, right? It's a contract they sign with the feds. They get money for it. You know, in our state, it's illegal to do that. It prohibits state agencies, whether it's courts or schools or social service agencies, the licensing department, from sharing information with the federal government or barring access to services based on immigration status. During the first Trump administration, the Department of Licensing was discovered, our Department of Licensing was discovered to be passing information on to the feds. There was a big shakeup. Those people were gone. Yeah, we had a governor who was really immigrant protective, and he took action.
And a population who spoke out against this. So they were all scandalized. They didn't really realize the extent to which they were being used as an arm of the government, of the Trump administration. They were shocked. And the change happened relatively rapidly. It was amazing. Okay, where were you? The law required that schools create model policies. The police and courts and others must create model policies, but they also awaited the Attorney General's providing a model and the language for that. And that has come about since. And so one of the things you can do, and we have done in the past, even as far back as Trump won, is to go into the schools and ask for those policies, or to do Know Your Rights training to the staff, so that they have a protocol that they must follow in the case that ICE comes to the door. So this is something that is a protection of employees in a business situation. It's not a requirement, but it is an encouragement. I'm trying to collapse several things here. And I want to just point out that you, through your networks, can urge businesses and organizations and corporations and your own church, hospitals, service centers of any kind to develop these policies. So in our case, yes, of course. Yeah. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Yeah, bye, Francis. So in our church, we have a Spanish-speaking congregation that has services every Sunday at 6 o'clock, and the English-speaking congregation subgroup formed a doorkeeper group, and we rotate for 3 weeks at a time, coming an hour before their service starts to an hour after their service starts, behind a locked door, and all the other access doors to the church are locked. And we have this protocol that we have trained everyone to follow. And who should be called to look at the warrant that is demanded at the door? Well, it's the priest in charge, or his or her designated other. And how should we follow? You know, we're all the basic practice of distinguishing between a judicial warrant and an immigration warrant, and keeping the doors locked and not consenting to entrance or search unless there's all these details are in place. This is your power under the Constitution, and you as an ally and an advocate on behalf of the immigrant who is vulnerable here. And it applies in the street, it applies for them in their household or you, and it applies in any other place, actually. You can, and any private place. So this is the power of Keep Washington Working as it's been expanded now. But it is not being followed in every school and every hospital and every social services organization. So you can decide what you're connected to somehow through your relationship or your friends or your social group, and ask questions politely and respectfully about what procedure is in place if I should come to the door.
What about a locked car?
Yes. That you're in a locked?
If you're in a locked car, can they come use that?
Yes, your car is your personal space. You lower the window part way, you put your hands on the steering wheel, and you answer the questions of show me your license and your insurance card and so forth. But you say you do not consent to a search, and you have to have a warrant, and I refuse to answer your questions under the Fourth Amendment.
We know with Lalo Juarez, who was picked up in the Mount Vernon area, or Bellingham-ish, Skagit, that they just broke his window. And I'm not even sure about, are we obligated to roll down the window a tiny bit? Can't we just talk through a closed window, because they could have tear gassed him, whatever. But they just broke the window. They're breaking down doors. So we have lots of rules in place, and they are being violated all the time.
I don't know if people have been following the case of Lalo. Lalo is a labor organizer with a farm worker union called Families United for Justice, Familias Unidas por la Justicia, up in Skagit County, Skagit and Whatcom. They are an amazing group. He came to this country when he was 12 years old. He is Mexican and also indigenous, and he has become a union leader. Very well known, very respected. He's been here in Olympia many times. We in Strengthening Sanctuary Alliance have had the honor to work closely with Familias Unidas several times. And he was taking his partner to work, and the car was stopped, pulled over. He rolled down the window a crack and said, why are you here? Show me the warrant. I've seen videos of this tool that they have. It's a laser tool. They put it up against the window, and the window disintegrates. So they did that with him, and then they pulled him out and cuffed him and took him. He's at the Northwest Detention Center, which Steve and Francis both mentioned. Now, because of Familias Unidas' connections, how well known they are, they had immediate access to an attorney. And there was a hearing, as I understand it, on Friday, but we don't, in front of an immigration judge inside the detention center, but we don't know what the result is. But so we're talking about someone who I think came to prominence because of his labor activism, but is known to be, and actually had DACA, I believe, Jean. So legally, I can't figure out what justification, if any, they could have for holding him. But it is their intention to deport him. He was actually online to be put on a plane to be flown to Mexico, and because his attorney had filed, a quick appeal, they pulled him out of line and took him back to the detention center. So if you want to learn more about this case, it's Lalo Juarez, right? Alfredo Juarez, and they're accepting funds for his legal defense fund. There's a lot of information online about him. So I think the only thing we wanted to do here, because the writing is very small, and we are running out of time for this part of the presentation, is just stress that what we're seeing more and more are work raids, right? There was also a work raid up in Whatcom County of a roofing company where I think 37, thank you, immigrants were. So you know about that. And we also know that there was an attempt at a strike there a couple of years ago. So we don't know what's going on there. There's a politics to it. We really do not know. But we know that that for whatever reason, that company was not prepared. Because if there are public and private places to an establishment, right? And federal immigration enforcement cannot go into the private spaces without a valid warrant. They can go into the public spaces, but not the private spaces. So we're going to see this happen more and more, I think, and this is one of the things that you could help business owners in our community to understand. If they can clearly designate the distinction between a public and private space, they can control ICE's access, or they can try. You have a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm right, but I thought that employers could legally be penalized for hiring these people, but I never hear of that happening. Do you know of any cases where a corporation has been fined or somebody put in jail because of their hiring of these people?
No, I don't. I don't.
But I think it is a law, though.
I think we know that there are corporations which make it a policy to hire people because if they're if they're vulnerable, it's hard for them to organize. We also know there are places where people may be producing documents which look authentic, and in some cases they may be authentic, right?
Yeah.
Because they're also picking people up who have work permits here.
Yeah.
So
I hear of companies like Tyson that are hiring 12
Yes.
and 14-year-old children from other
yes.
countries.
And those are also often, they're subcontracting, right? That's their excuse. Yeah.
I did a Know Your Rights with Wyson the other day, and I signed up to be on a rapid response team for Thurston County, and they said that they had such a backlog of people signed up for rapid response, like 1,000 people signed up, that they can't deal with it. But you just mentioned a rapid response here in Thurston County. I want to sign up. Can I sign up with you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. There's probably 25 of us already, so we're quite a big group. You know, the more the merrier. Yeah, let's talk about it. Okay, this is simply, and I think Sherry is handing this out, right? This is for you to understand your rights as an observer, right? What you can do and what you cannot do. So rather than review this, I'm just going to ask you to look at the documentation that you have in front of you. But this is a really important thing that you could do with an educated group or by yourself if you see something happen on the street. It is scary. I will say that. It is scary to do it. You're talking about people who are very, very focused on their job and are willing to be vehement and a little bit threatening if they think that you are getting in the way. So you don't want to interfere. You don't want to stand between them and whoever it is that they are seeking to detain or question or harass. If they ask you to step back, you step back a little bit, but you have the right to observe, you have the right to film, you have the right to take notes, you have the right to ask them for a badge number, you have the right to do those things. Okay, so please just, feel solid in that. The same way as we ask people to feel solid in their rights as immigrants under the Constitution, feel solid in those rights. Yes? Or I can repeat what you say. Okay.
I'm right now putting a contact in my phone for the Solidarity Network's phone number, so if I see something, I can call that in. I'm also making a few notes in that so that I remember when I'm panicked what to do, to look for the warrant, what kind of warrant is it, and some of those kinds of things. So just a suggestion that others might want to do that as well.
That sounds great. Thank you. It's really helpful.
There is an app too that people can put on their phones too.
Yeah, it's on the slide,
Okay, good.
and you all have access to this slide presentation. So there's a lot more detail in the slides, and including a page of references that gives you the app for an audio version of Know Your Rights and an automatic contact information template that you can fill out in advance, or the person most vulnerable for being harassed can fill out and send on the spot. I just wanted to say one thing about this, well, 2 points. One is that this basic distinction between warrants and you knowing your rights as a recorder and observer these are all the fundamentals, the fundamental core of your being able to act in any way, or inform others or share information. If you should be acting in defense of someone or supporting as an ally someone who is accosted, then at the point raised about being so nervous and scared, it is a flight or fight response that will come over you regardless of what you do in advance to prepare. So in the moment, I was told by a counselor, when this happens, before you speak, you should take a deep breath and then say, so. There is no way to proceed with you know, it interrupts your paralysis. It gets you into a zone where you have a speaking voice and you're calm and you can be neutral and respectful. And that's the way you need to be. I'm recording this. I'm staying 5 feet apart, you know, so on and so forth. But that is another thing that should go into your toolkit, is the way to calm yourself at the very beginning when something's happening. And then you come prepared with the attorney's name or the hotline or the Know Your Rights red cards, whatever.
That's good advice. Thank you. I also want to say, because I think it's nowhere on this presentation, that if the person who's being detained has had any interaction with ICE or the government before, they have what's called an A number. And if you can write down or record that A number, ask them for it. Ask them for their full name and the A number, because that's the way we track them through the system. If they get taken and we want to know where they are, we have to look them up that way. The government has what they call an alien tracker system. So I think we already talked a little bit about some of these things, and I just we wanted to show them to you, because if we were doing this presentation for an immigrant constituency, we would spend a lot of time on Know Your Rights at home, or Know Your Rights in the car, or Know Your Rights on the street, and we would have people practice that. We want to point out that there are some amazing videos that you can look at that go through that whole process, and you can see them in English and Spanish, in Vietnamese and Cambodian, in multiple languages, okay? And so those are great resources, and they're also listed at the end of this PowerPoint. But
I'll share the slides. I'll link it on the recent services page on the ouc.org website. It'll also be in the description of our YouTube video for this forum.
thank you. Thanks,
Do
Teresa.
you want to say that on the microphone? So they're going to share the slides? Yeah.
On the recent services page.
On the recent services page.
Thank you for having this slide, because this was what I wanted to ask about. What if, because people are afraid, or don't know what to do, they let someone in and they don't have a judicially signed warrant with that person's name, they just have a generic ICE warrant. Can they basically ask them to leave again? I mean, it's a kind of like a vampire where you have to do like a banishing spell once you've let them in. I mean,
You can ask them to leave, but if you open the door, even a crack, it's often taken as consent. And they'll jam their foot in the door and they'll force their way in. Once the door is open, it's up to them whether they leave or not. Yes.
I took the WASN rapid response training a week ago, and they showed a video, and those of you who were on it saw that very disturbing, where I said, well, you invited us in, and you said we could come in, and the person said, I did not, I opened the door. Am I right with that? Am I remembering that? And they must have said that to each other 30 times in this interaction. It was horrible. And they looked like they were going to the gym. I mean, they had like sweatpants on and casual, I mean, dressed like any of us here. You would never think that they were ICE or anybody else. And in the end, they took away the person. It was, yeah, it was horrible.
Thank you. Steve, would you mind giving the mic to this person over here?
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, I know.
So thank you for mentioning multiple languages. I work in language access. It's super important to me, and it is a huge challenge now that one of the executive orders that has been rescinded in recent weeks takes away the requirement for federal agencies to provide services and access in the languages that people use. Has there been a pattern or issues known with ICE not even attempting to communicate with people in the languages that they use?
They may or may not try. If they get a court hearing, there is supposed to be an interpreter there. What we know is that generally if people are Spanish speakers, there will likely be an interpreter, but if they speak indigenous languages like Mam or Quiche or Canjobal or Mixteco, there will not. And so people are often in court not completely understanding the proceeding that's happening. Yeah. And I believe, didn't Trump say he's once again proclaiming that we are a monolingual country, we are English only? Didn't he say that? So again, I think this will be challenged in the courts, right? But which means doesn't mean that things won't go forward, but that we're all sort of holding our breath to see how it will end up.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really important point. So basically, whether you're on the street or in your car or you're in your house, the suggestions are the same. You have a right to remain silent. You have a right to refuse a search without a warrant. You do not have to sign anything without consulting with an attorney, and you have the right to ask for legal representation, right? Really, it's those four things. That repeats it. Yeah. Oops. Okay. So we wanted to then come back to really where we started, which was to talk about whether there are forms of action that you individually or collectively as a group are interested in taking. And just here are some recommendations, right? To learn and share Know Your Rights information with immigrant communities and also with allies. These are things everybody needs to know. To encourage local organizations and employers to take proactive steps to defend their staff and also their clientele. Sherry and I recently did a presentation for the YMCA for their branch managers to talk about exactly what might be involved in if ICE were to come to the door.
And they're a wonderful example of what a whole organization can do. They put on their website, not because of us, but before we did our presentation, actually, the woman in manager had, out of Shelton, had put on their newsletter the short animated video of all 4 Know Your Rights responses. This is something that someone could see without being able to read and write, which many impacted immigrants, of course, are in this situation. But then I was going on their webpage to find out, swim hours or something, and there it was again. So think of the people that are more knowledgeable today because the Y did this proactive thing. And we can ask of businesses and organizations to do that. You could put it on your church website, people cruising for a church to go to. So think creatively about your own network and how this information can be publicized to both people most vulnerable who are impacted, and to allies and advocates who are saying, what can we do? What can I do?
I just was at a meeting where the governor spoke. Is this working? Is working? Okay, closer to my. Governor Ferguson said that he would not let children of parents that are deported be alone. Is there any direct service for these children and people that maybe open their home of anything like that? He didn't go into it, so I'm just wondering what's going on there.
It's a great question. So, it's okay? The model policies for schools require the school to follow up with community agencies to make sure that children's needs are being taken care of if something happens to their parents, that they simply don't get picked up, for instance, by Child Protective Services. That's a requirement as part of the model policy. Whether school districts are doing it is another question, right? It's an important thing to find out. We also know that the government has set up a crisis response committee, which is supposed to be looking at exactly the issues that you were talking about, and I don't think we know what's going to come out of that yet.
And the other thing, of course, is to work with improving and strengthening this family safety plan strategy, which is to sit down with the immigrants and walk them through this process of naming a caregiver. And in our state, the Child Protective Services and the, what's it called now, the DSHS service, the state agencies will agree to follow this caregiver process. They will not put the child into foster care, which other states would do, and that's the default. If no caregiver is named and the school does not have an emergency contact with the caregiver on it, you see, that's the key, then the child is put into foster care. So there's several levels of things that can help here, but having a supportive state government is certainly part of it, and having people going out into the community to do these family safety plans is the other piece, so that individual immigrants can name for themselves someone in their family who ideally is a citizen and a close relation, that they can even go so far as to name them, give them power of attorney.
So just to say, before the mic goes over, that if you're interested in doing this work, we are organizing crews to do this now, and Sherry is the person to speak to about it, because she's the one who's coordinating it. So just like Naki just gave me her name and phone number to put on the rapid response team, talk to Sherry if you're interested in the family safety plans. We're talking about doing this across county lines, too. There are people who are starting to do this in Mason County, for instance, in Shelton, and they could use some support. So it's helpful if people are bilingual, but there's room for English speakers as well. Steve, did you say someone needed the mic?
This isn't nearly as important as the questions that were recently answered, but it gives me hope if there are. Are there any states that have become sanctuary states?
Yes, we're not the only ones. I think New York is a sanctuary state, is it not? Not the state? We're not going to be good at this one. I'm sorry. But please look it up. It's a good question. So would you like a few minutes just to talk with each other in small groups about these different strategies? I think your SWIFT team has already done some prep work, and Steve, maybe you have something to add to this?
I was just going to suggest, rather than do the small group thing, because we're kind of running out of time, how about if we do some brainstorming? Maybe you could record on the flip chart things that people are thinking they might do, and it might spark some interest among other people.
Be fabulous, yeah. Does that work for you all? Are there any more slides? This one, which just was the family safety plan, and then this is the Wyson Hotline poster. which you're welcome to download off this slide, and because it should be posted in different places. And then this is a list of your resources. So that's going to stay with you. There's only one that I kind of wanted to demonstrate, and it's the KYR app, if people don't already have it on their phones. Do you? I can just, while you're doing that, I can just get my phone and get ready to play it for you.
The app actually has a QR code, and if you have your cell phone with you, you can simply read her code off her phone, and it will take you right to the site, and you can play and see and share with other people. I want to share one. Yeah.
What is the name of the app? KYR. It's called KYR for immigrants.
KYR 4, number 4, immigrants. That's it. And there's a QR code, as I say, that you can share with other folks, and they don't even need to write down the website. I want to share an example just to kind of prompt you a little of someone answering this question. This was a member of Strengthening Sanctuary who is not at all proficient in Spanish, hardly at all knows any Spanish. And she and a friend took a little 6-hour trip one day into South Thurston County, Yelm and Rochester and little towns like that. And the friend was from that area, and so that was helpful, and maybe spoke a little Spanish, but mostly they did this entirely in English and entirely cold. And what they had were the Know Your Rights cards, which you could get out and show, and a couple of flyers like we've shared with you. And they stopped at taco trucks and restaurants and food banks and social service centers, and they passed out the cards and the flyers, and uniformly people were amazed and grateful. They hadn't seen these. They were in Rochester, Roof and Rise, which are 2 social service agencies, said, please come back and bring us more, or conduct a Know Your Rights workshop. And so these communities are basically untouched, but as fearful as anyone else. They're very, very vulnerable. And Jean, if I call you out, you want to just share what your example of what you did privately, sharing these cards and so on?
I've been taking the cards to to different Latinx grocery stores. I'm well aware there are many immigrants in our extended community who are not Spanish speakers, who speak other languages, but the Know Your Rights cards that I have are in Spanish, and those are the places that I've been going to places from here, from mostly Lacey to Lakewood, and I don't know what else you wanted me to say about that.
And then you went back to the same.
Oh, right. I went back and refilled, and I do speak Spanish, so I was chatting with folks there, and folks are really appreciative of anybody taking their time to try to look out for their community. Although I'm a bit freaking out about how effective are these when the cops will the police, the ICE will just break people's windows, or but then I think people who have these are getting some also. Especially if there's some human interaction with it, or getting some sense of like, oh, there's somebody out there who cares about me, and that has value as well.
And we're mobilizing, right? We're building a movement here that we can all be part of. These are the cards, right? And your congregation has some, and we brought you more. Yeah, so if people want them, we can leave some more with you, and you can pick them up there. Okay. All right, so you'll have to download the app for yourself and listen to it. Let's brainstorm.
Anything you want to just record that you're thinking you might be able to do personally, or anything that you would want me to put down? Any thoughts, any ideas? Steve?
Well, I could say I took the Know Your Rights training. Wyson offers that every few weeks. I took the Rapid Responsers training through Wyson. I've asked them if they were going to offer accompaniment training, and we'd love to work with you. If you want to provide that kind of training, maybe we could have you come back and do that. Also, I mentioned that we're going to be working on raising money for passports through our church auction. And so, yeah. Anybody else want to talk about things they're doing?
Thanks. This is also sort of a question. It sounds like Lacey and Tumwater are not sanctuary cities. So, given that we have the Washington what was it called again? Keep Washington Working. Is there some value still, though, to pressuring Lacey and Tumwater and other towns in Thurston County? So that might be something. And I know Olympia Indivisible has an immigrants team, and there's SWIFT here. So coordinating on those things would be good. Oh, I see somebody raising her hand. Yeah, I talked to her. It looks like. And I am also wondering about, I know Olympia School District has been very proactive about this, but I don't know about, say, Yelm School District or North Thurston or Tumwater.
North Thurston, we understand, has also been very proactive, but Tumwater is an issue, right?
Yeah, we wrote to all the school districts in the county and got good responses back from North Thurston and Olympia, but never heard anything back from Yelm, Rochester, the rest of them. They just had nothing, or at least they wouldn't admit that they had anything. Also tried to get in touch with the Nisqually Jail, and they wouldn't respond. The sheriff, I think, is pretty progressive, and our county jail is progressive, but the Nisquallies may just turn people over to ICE. We don't know. They're not under state county jurisdiction.
I understand from one of our city councilors, Clark Gilman, that they have agreed to for prisoners who come from here and are sent there, that they will honor Olympia's policies. Yeah. I don't know about for other folks, but that's what the Nisqually folks have said. The other thing is that all school districts are required now to have a policy on the books, but there's the difference between having the policy on the books and actually implementing it, right? And so we're hearing about school districts where, for instance, they have all the correct language on the books, but the language really says, you need to train your staff. You need to provide Know Your Rights materials to families. You need to do outreach to families. They're not doing those things. So if you're asking, which is wonderful, ask for what they actually have done, not just for what they say.
And I think it's okay to offer assistance as well. And, not necessarily with the families, because that's personal information and only the district can do that. But to say, we will come and give your staff a training, and then of course we'd have to organize that. But school districts are tapped for resources and being threatened with loss of resources.
Yeah, that's great. And we just represent the tip of the iceberg of folks who are eager and excited to do training. So, we're a resource for you. I mean, if you feel you can do it yourself, that's great, but we're a resource for you if that's helpful.
Maybe we should be wrapping up here pretty soon. I don't want to take everybody's day. Oh.
Shanti Mai is a member of our Rapid Response Group, so we know each other and appreciate each other. Yeah.
My name is Elaine, and I don't want to take energy away from all of you, but I'm with Olympia Indivisible. I'm co-lead on the immigrant justice team. We're getting our feet wet with everything, so if you want to talk to me afterwards, but I don't want to, I'm not trying to steal you away from the UU's energy, but I'm here to learn. Okay, well, good.
If anybody's here that isn't on the SWIFT mailing list, let me know and I'll add you. Is there anything else you wanted to say in closing, or?
No, I know we've got time limits here. We also have cards if you want to get in touch with us. I'm happy to pass them out as we go out the door. And just really appreciate your time and hope we get to work together on some things that we all care about.
Yeah, Sherry and Ann, thank you so much for coming today. It's been wonderful.